Inflation, the world's silent wealth killer. Now, unless you've been living under a rock for the past few years, you would have definitely heard about inflation. It's affecting people, businesses, and governments around the world. But it's not all doom and gloom. If you want to learn 5 ways to make money in a high inflationary world, then keep watching, as you've come to the right place. Today, I'm going to be talking about how you can make money in a high inflation world, and I'm going to be giving you 4 strategies for doing so. But before I do that, it's important for us to define just what inflation is and what causes it. So here it goes. So what is inflation? Well, put simply, inflation is a rise in the value of goods and services. Now, you would have seen the effects of inflation whether you're out doing your grocery shopping, maybe you've got a car and you've been filling up with gasoline, maybe you've been out shopping for clothes, or perhaps you've been out eating at a restaurant and you've noticed that actually, certainly recently, prices have been going up quite significantly. And I want to use an example just to illustrate how inflation works. Suppose you went down to your local store today and you bought a can of soda, and that can of soda cost you $1. You drank that can of soda, enjoyed it, and you didn't drink that same can of soda again for another year. After a year, you went back to that same store and you decided to buy the same can of soda, except this time that can of soda is now $1.10. So there's a 10-cent increase on what you paid last year. That increase is inflation at work. So a fair question is, what actually causes inflation? Well, it's quite a complex topic, but to simplify things, inflation really is caused by 2 things. Either the amount of money in a system, in an economy, surges very quickly so that you have lots of money chasing the same amount of goods and services at any period of time, and that supply and demand imbalance causes prices to rise. Or similarly, on the other side, you have the number of goods and services reduce, but still the same amount of money in a system, and therefore there is more money chasing less goods and services, and that causes inflation to rise as well. Now, over the past couple of years, we've had the global pandemic due to COVID-19, which has caused huge challenges across the world, both from a health perspective, but also financially. And in the early part of the pandemic in 2020, governments were forced to lock down their countries around the world, and that caused economic activity to decline sharply. Now, in response to that, governments and central banks have said countries around the world would put in almost unprecedented levels of economic stimulus, trillions and trillions of dollars of capital created and money created out of thin air and put into the system in the forms of loans to businesses, stimulus checks given to individuals straight into their bank accounts, furlough schemes so that staff could keep being paid and not laid off by employers despite not actually going to work because they had to stay at home, and all sorts of other schemes. Now, all of this stimulus has had to take time to work through the system, and it's taken a couple of years to do that. And what you're now seeing is the effect of inflation playing through. There's been a huge surge in the money supply, chasing the same amount of goods and services, and therefore you're seeing significant inflation. So now you know what inflation is and what causes it. Well, how do you make money in such an environment? It's a great question. So tip number 1, invest in assets that appreciate during high inflationary periods. And there are a few assets that do that pretty well. So real estate property. What happens in a high inflationary environment is you have a surge in the money supply, as I described earlier, and that capital sitting in people's bank accounts, it doesn't want to stay there because the holders of that cash are losing the value of that money because it's being eroded by inflation. What they do is they tend to take that out and push it into other assets like real estate and property. And because you have a huge amount of people doing that, it usually pushes the prices of those assets up. Similarly, you have stocks. Again, money moves out of cash and moves into stocks and shares of companies. Another example is precious metals. So again, people move money out of cash because it's losing value, and It's why you see things like gold do reasonably well and hold its value in high inflationary environments. Tip number 2, take advantage of tax breaks and deductions. So depending on where you are in the world, you will have various tax breaks and schemes available to you, whether you're an individual or a business, and depending on how you set yourself up. Now, I would always recommend going to speak to a good qualified tax advisor, so do ask your friends and family and people in your network about who you can know that can recommend. But typically, most jurisdictions around the world will have relief schemes around things like if you're borrowing money, you can offset your interest against your income. If you've got children, you may have good tax benefits for having children. If you invest in your business and you buy hard assets, property, plant, equipment, you may get tax relief on those as well. All of these things serve to reduce your tax bill, which is a good thing because it puts more money back in your pocket, and that's money that you can then use to spend or reinvest. And all of these things are great shields ultimately against inflation, because it keeps more money in your pocket whilst perhaps your expenses are going up because of inflation. Tip number 3, cut your expenses. Sounds really obvious, but it's amazing how many opportunities there are if you look hard enough at your bank statements, your credit card statements over the last 3 or 6 months, and opportunities for really cutting your expenses. We take out all sorts of streaming subscriptions, gym memberships, all sorts of random things that we often forget about, and we get charged for it, and you're not getting the value out of it, you're not using it. So what I would recommend is go out and see where you can really cut expenses. Try not to make too much of a difference to your lifestyle, but it's amazing how much of stuff we can actually live without. And again, by cutting those expenses, you keep 100% of those savings in your pocket, and so as prices are rising, you've at least got more money in your pocket to be able to cushion you against those rises. Tip number 4, increase your income. Now, if you're in a job and you're getting paid a salary, perhaps it's time to think about the last time you had a pay rise. Maybe you've been doing a great job, you think you've been providing value, and it's a good opportunity to talk to your hiring manager or your boss and say, look, is there an opportunity for a pay rise, and see what you have to do and see if you can get a pay increase that way. Alternatively, if you don't think you can do that and you think it's time to maybe look elsewhere, most places around the world have good fluid job markets and unemployment levels are low, and ultimately companies are always looking for really good people, so it could be an opportunity for you to go and get that dream job and get a significant pay rise. If you run your own business, then perhaps think about, are you charging the right prices for your products or services? When was the last time you put a price increase through? Again, there's a good opportunity for you to look at your current pricing structure and assess if that's right and whether you need to potentially increase your prices. Or alternatively, maybe you want to set up a new product line within your existing company where you think you can charge a premium price and higher margins. Remember, price increases or salary increases, all of these things contribute to increasing your income, and again, putting more money back into your pocket, which is better for shielding those inflationary increases on your expenses. And a special bonus tip, number 5, is invest in yourself. I've had nearly 20 years of experience within finance and business, and I can honestly say that the best investment I've ever made is in myself. It's constantly educating myself, and it doesn't have to cost the earth. I listen to lots of free podcasts. I've taken out Audible memberships on Amazon and listened to ebooks on there and listened. I've downloaded books and read them. I've bought physical books. I speak to people, I network regularly, I get out there and I read and I learn and I consume knowledge. All of those things have helped me immensely in terms of building up my own financial position, and it certainly helped me think about how I can protect me and my own family and ensure our wealth is protected within this high inflationary environment. So I hope this video has given you some great ideas for how you can make money in a high inflationary environment. Remember, high inflation tends to be temporary. Whilst we're in the eye of the storm right now and it can certainly feel tough, take solace from the fact that these things do pass and eventually things will settle down. I hope you found this video really useful. If you have, please like or subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.